So I guess that's the period of my life that was the most impactful, when most of the things happened for me, most of my experiences started, most of my experimentation took place, shall we say. So yeah, it's and obviously because of I was in a band in London in the 90s, in amongst all of what was happening at that time in that place. It was an amazing time to be a young guy in a band. So I don't think it's ever really left me. But certainly, yeah, I have been revisiting it, but revisiting it, as we discussed, from a completely different perspective. Because of course this was before the internet, and now it's after the internet and everything. You know, very, very different.
So we're going to ease you into the book, into the story by getting like a hold of who's who and what is this band and who are the characters and where is it all taking place. But to begin with the beginning, how did this book come about?
Well, I started it a long while ago. I started it in 2015. So I've written quite a bit since, and I've even published stuff that I started after this. I started it because of a conversation I had in London with a guy who actually was successful as a musician and is still performing now, a guy called Howie Payne, who was in a band from Liverpool. And I met him accidentally. He was a friend of a friend of my cousin, and I met him at some event in London. I can't remember what it was now even. And I didn't know many people there, he didn't know many people there, and we found out we were both in bands in the 90s, and inevitably we got speaking about bands in the 90s, even in 2015, which is actually more or less when the book is set. The book is set in 2016. It was kind of nostalgic even then. Yeah. A lot of things had changed. He was still doing it, obviously I wasn't doing it anymore. And I told him that I wrote, and he says, well, then you have to write a novel about that time. I don't think anybody's done that. I don't think there's any good books about that period. And I was like, okay, why not? So I started writing a book. I didn't want it to be, though, a nostalgic, self-indulgent, lads in a band kind of book. I didn't want to just focus on how glamorous it was there and all the success that all these bands were having, because I didn't have any success, and even though I got a taste of the glamour, my life wasn't especially glamorous. I didn't have any money, and I didn't have a successful band, and then the band fell apart.
As they do.
As they do, yeah. So I didn't want to write this self-indulgent book about being in a band and glamour and blah. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to write a book about a band that didn't make it, a band that failed, that had promised, and for whatever reason, they didn't make it. But at the same time, I wanted to connect it to the modern day. So this is why the story is not just about this band, but I introduced this modern character in 2016 who discovers a band by finding a song in a folder, just a generic folder. You know, you must have seen them on the internet. You find a band, a folder with just loads of music and stuff, and you just go through, and some of it's great, some of it's terrible. And she finds this one song, and I think most people in their life have heard a song and thought, that's the best song I've ever heard, and you stick it on repeat, and you play it over and over and over again until it just becomes part of your life.
We're going to get to the characters quite soon, but I mean, so, we were talking about being in a band.
Yeah. So
and I mean, there are not written that many good books about the banking sector either. So you could have gone that way, but you chose.
So that's what I wanted to write the book about. So I wanted to write a book about that time, set in that time, but that was also relevant to people reading it now. So that's how the book came about. And when I first started writing it, the modern character was a guy. And I started writing it like that, and I wrote maybe a third of the book, and it just bored me. I got bored with it. I thought this isn't interesting. This is not really telling the story I want to say. It hasn't got the right dynamic. So I put it to one side, worked on some other stuff, and then a few years ago, I went back and looked at it. and I looked at the modern character and I thought, what's wrong here? And what was wrong was it was another guy. So you had the band that was guys, and you had this guy that was a guy, and there was just too many guys. So I changed the modern character into a 20-year-old Norwegian woman. What do we prefer for a 20-year-old girl or woman? Woman. Okay, so a 20-year-old woman. And so she finds this song, and then it makes the dynamic, it totally changed the dynamic of the book. And it took away that last sort of element of it being a self-indulgent guys in a band book.
Yeah. So tell us something about London and the UK in the 90s. Things were buzzing, right?
Everything was, yeah. I mean, it wasn't just music. It was films. I mean, this was the time of like 4 Weddings and a Funeral and all those kind of rom-com films, and Guy Ritchie stuff, the Lock, Stock and Snatch and all those kind of films. There was a lot of really good TV being made, a lot of good, I assume there was a lot of good books being written at that time, but I didn't read any of them. And obviously everything was centred on London.
And you had this young, quite energetic Prime Minister.
Yeah,
this was
Tony Blair, yeah.
Iraq War, obviously, but
yeah,
Cool Britannia was a thing that we weren't even here.
And that was coined by Tony Blair, I think, wasn't it? So, yeah, and it really was. It was from the music scene. It was this sort of a second British invasion.
Yeah.
And some of the book is about looking back. Obviously, she looks back from 2016 to the 90s, and we looked back at the time from in the 90s to the 60s. So it was the things like the Beatles and the Stones. It was still fresh. I mean, it's hard to think of it now, but it was only 30 years before. So and that's nearer than we are now to the 90s. So.
And don't look back in anger, I heard them say. Yeah.
Which in itself was taken from a play in the 60s.
Yeah.
So it's all connected.
It's
so
a big circle. Yeah.
Yeah,
You had obviously Blur and Oasis going on.
Yeah.
A lot of energy.
Yeah, it definitely was, and I think because it predates internet, it was when people still went out and did stuff, and had it was much more about being out and being seen. So all these bands used to go to nightclubs, and even though we weren't famous, even though we hadn't got the record deals, we would still go to the same nightclubs and the same bars. And so you would go into a pub in Camden, and Amy Winehouse is there or something, or David Albarn's there. And do you remember the Pulp video for Disco 2000, where they're on the dance floor with all the coloured lights? No? Yeah, look it up on YouTube. Anyway, but that was an actual venue. That was the club where we went. It was called Club Smashing, and it was very camp and it was very fun. And everybody would be there. A lot of the American musicians that came over would be there. I never saw Kurt Cobain, but I did see his missus. What's her name? Courtney Love. She was there. People like that. Actors were there. It was. I mean. It wasn't the same as the swinging 60s, but on a sort of smaller scale, it was very similar. There weren't as many bands, but it was all very focused on these particular venues and particular areas of London.
Sounds like a time that's easy to be nostalgic about.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like a bit of the old world, the century that was about the end and the way of living. That was kind of taking its last breath in a way. You in the book you make like a very sort of marked division between pre and the post internet culture.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly the band and I guess a lot of what the band think is what I thought at the time. There was definitely a feeling. I don't think that it was something that we felt at the time, because even then, I don't think anybody predicted how important the internet was going to be and what a massive difference it would make. So at the time, I don't think we had that sense that this is the end of an era. But then within a short period of time, even by the millennium, it was definitely, oh my God, we were the who the last in that line. You know, that last line of bands that went round the country in a van. You know, that advertised their concerts in a newspaper and sold paper tickets. So I mean, you couldn't. You obviously, I mean, most of us are at the age where we can remember that period where you had to make a plan if you were going to meet somebody. I mean, if you wanted to go to a club, then I suppose this is why the clubs were so important and the bars were so important and why they became key parts of their life, because you couldn't arrange to meet somebody by sending a text message, but you would go to the pub and they would probably be there. Or if they weren't there, somebody else would be there, somebody else you knew. And obviously, I guess you knew more people. I think people had a much bigger circle of friends back then, maybe. Especially if you were in the band scene and you rehearsed in the same places as these people, you played on the same venues on the same nights as people. So and then you had people that came to the gigs, and people would regularly come to our gigs. We didn't have a massive following, but it'd be the same people coming to each gig.
So I would love to have you read a couple of pages for us now to sort of take us into this world.
Yeah.